Behan Associates. He is a consultant with Saratoga Associates. He's going to be our facilitator today, but I'll just do a quick introduction overview of how I think this meeting should run. We have an hour and a half tonight, which is good to put a cap on it so we don't rabbit hole. So basically, I want to go through the agenda that I submitted, which outlines the challenges that the city is facing right now, opportunities, goals that the city may have, land use, current land use regulations, proposed land use regulations, and then we can drill down if we want to in specific neighborhoods. I know you all represent specific wards, so you may have concerns, recommendations, et cetera, based on the neighborhoods around the city. So our current comprehensive plan, as Councilor Barbell stated, is old. It's from 1999. It's best practice to update a comprehensive plan every 10 years, but here we are 21 years later, and we're ready to update it. The city received a grant from the Department of State for 3 objectives. One, to finalize our LWRP, which we're currently in the process of that right now. We're in the final stages of that draft document. It's sort of a prescriptive process going forward with the Department of State to finalize that, and now we're moving into updating the comprehensive plan. So this is kind of our first step, which is the visioning process. We do have a public advisory committee for this process, which Councilor Barbell and Councilor McFarland are both on that committee, and it's made up of other city stakeholders as well. We have met twice already to talk about the LWRP process, but now that we're moving on from that, we're moving into the comp plan. So now we're just trying to gather information from everybody, and the first step is your board or your council, and we're also going to do the same meeting with the planning board and the zoning board, and then we'll meet again with the public advisory committee to put all the information together and talk about next steps and what this document is actually going to look like. So our current comp plan, we can kind of go through that, not in great detail, but we can talk about, you know, what is still relevant, what isn't, what we'd like to see change in that document. It's a very land use regulation heavy, zoning recommendation heavy document, which I don't think this new one really needs to be, since we are going to be updating our zoning ordinance at the same time that we're updating our comp plan. So I think this new comp plan can be more of a vision document, a goals document, an action forward document. So for tonight, I basically want to get ideas, concepts, big picture stuff from you guys. We don't need to drill down into, you know, we want new sidewalks on Broad Street. This can be big picture, like we want the city to be more inclusive, we want it to be more ADA accessible, we want to adopt complete streets, make it more walkable, more mixed use, density, etc. So big picture stuff. With that being said, I will let Michael Allen take over and facilitate this meeting. We'll kind of just go through our agenda. I don't know if we want to just shout out ideas, but I'm going to stand here like Vanna White and write down what you guys suggest. Maybe we can play Pictionary later, I don't know. But I will be over here and take your suggestions.
Thank you very much, everybody. As Melina mentioned, I'm Michael Allen with BN Planning and Design. We're partnered with Saratoga Associates on the greater project of updating the LWRP as well as the comp plan and zoning. As she mentioned, our goal here, we're just starting this out right now. We're gearing up to start to begin to design some public outreach, some public meetings of various formats. And what we thought would be useful is to discuss with you what are the big picture or the most important topics. And we can use those then to begin to design the public outreach process, perhaps around having meetings to discuss specific topics, or having meetings where we break out into different groups to tackle various issues. And we wanted to know what are the most important issues citywide and individual wards that we should be aware of when we're sort of designing this. I believe some of you may have already started to look at the old comp plan. We thought, just as a starting point, it might make sense to have everyone, if you have any thoughts about the existing comp plan, what's still valid in it that we need to carry forward, start with some of that. Assess the document for what's good in it and what can be discarded. We're probably going to be putting together a completely new document, but we thought it's useful to see if there's anything that should be carried forward. So I will start, and then we'll get into some of the items that Melania put in the agenda. So with that in mind, I wanted to sort of open it up to anybody who's familiar or just reviewed the comp plan, what elements are no longer valid and what should be carried forward.
Well, I have a couple just reactions to it. I don't know that I'm an expert on what should be in there and should not be in there, but when I was looking at it, it seems very heavily to a zoning kind of perspective, carving out areas of the city for potential future developments. I think you could take all that development stuff out of there. It's so dated that it's not relevant anymore, especially if you look at the US Oval in Ward 1 and what's in there, that does not apply anymore in this, in the city. And I'm familiar with that area, but, you know, there are, anyway, so take that out, and then I think we have to really start over and look at these core areas on the land map that was in the plan and have specific conversations around those areas and where there's a potential for economic development, housing, alternative or recreation, whatever, what makes the most sense to come in there. And then we have, you know, a number of things throughout that plan that are exceptions within the zoning, you know, the code that's in there. It's I'll take since the gym is on the south side, you know, if you wanted to put a recreation, a health gym, a health, whatever, some kind of a health center, even though it might fit with the zoning code, it requires a special permit on top of the zoning code to have that put in place. I think there are a number of issues around the special permits in this thing that really need to be looked at in terms of whether or not special permits need to be there for all the things that were identified in the previous zoning code. I think it just creates complications if somebody's looking at trying to do development in the city when you have all these exceptions within the code. Language is very vague in some areas that opens the door to all kinds of interpretation about what can or can't go in some place. And I think we got to be tighter on some of the language in the zoning areas to be more specific about what's permitted in that area and what's exempted from building in that area. So those are just a few initial reactions to looking through that document.
Okay, very good. So in general, one of the things you were saying was, as far as special permits, you generally want us to take a look at whether or not you have too many. Is there a way to streamline this so they're more
I would
allowed
like
by
to see
right?
fewer special permits and
Right.
more description of what's allowed in an area. And if you don't want, you know, health centers or gyms or whatever into a part of the city, then you gotta have a really good reason why it's not there, and it shouldn't be up to the developer to say, well, I can build it here, but then I gotta go get a special permit, and somebody decides on whatever board it is that looks at special permits, well, I don't really care about gyms, so I'm not gonna approve you. You know, it's either it can be done there or it can't be done there. That's the way I look at
There's
it.
a movement now to move away from, which is typical zoning, Euclidean zoning, which is residential here, industrial here, commercial here, it's all separated by zones, and a movement towards form-based code, which is if it meets these design standards, it could fit in this neighborhood. So if you have a commercial business, a retail business, if it looks a certain way, it probably could make sense and flow properly in a residential neighborhood. So I think that's something that we can identify in our comprehensive plan, is more of that form-based code, smart growth planning, which would then inform our zoning ordinance, and then we have to update the schedule of uses in our zoning ordinance to match those recommendations.
Yeah. I just don't want a lot of vague language. That's what I saw in there.
That is the one thing I would like to see most is a move to a form-based code rather than, as you say, Euclidean zoning. That's based on geography, I guess.
Right.
So, yes, there was a time in Plattsburgh when we did have such things as pharmacies and bakeries spread all over the city, small grocery stores.
Yep.
So if you didn't own a car, you could still, you know, get your provisions.
Yep.
I'd love to see us return to that.
Yeah, it's called a 15-minute neighborhood, so you're able to live somewhere and then walk to, like you said, the laundromat, to the grocery store, the pharmacy, all within a 15-minute radius of your house. There's definitely a movement towards that, and I think that's great.
We're being challenged to centralize things downtown just doesn't seem like a good idea to some segments of our population. So let's build out the outlying areas where people live and make it easy for them to recreate and also, obtain food and prescriptions and anything else they need.
Well, obviously, you still need to have some use regulations in place. You don't want a camera factory next to a multi-family housing unit, but there are exceptions for mixed uses in one zone.
In every cool city I've ever been to, what that boils down to is a bunch of cool neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
So let's work on that.
Well, I like what you said, Melina, about the 15-minute neighborhood. I'd never heard it described that way. But one of the things that I noticed when you sent us the Burlington plan is their movement towards more walkability, which I think is something that we've all been hoping for here. But if the zoning codes are standing in the way of creating something like this,
Yeah.
then that's something that we do need to seriously change, because like I've heard this a lot downtown. We don't have a grocery store downtown.
Yeah.
Like an actual grocery store. It used to be pharmacies downtown, aren't anymore. I mean, like those kinds of things that would promote walkability, which is healthier living, healthier for the environment, where you don't have to rely on transportation to get what you need,
Sure.
which is, I think, the only way that we're going to salvage this planet.
And you think about Saley Avenue, I forget the name of the mini mart, it used to be Lucky City Mart or something, the Eli's, that's not an allowed use. So that's a pre-existing non-conforming building, which is crazy to me that that's not an allowed use in a residential neighborhood. So yes, absolutely, walkability, allowing for mixed uses in residential neighborhoods is something we need to look at. And the whole point of this conversation and the comprehensive plan is to be a catch-all, be a roadmap, to identify all those big visions and goals. We'll then inform our zoning ordinance, which is our next step. So it's kind of cool that we're doing both of them together right now so that they can sync.
Mhm. Though I want to caution people, it's easy to dive right into the zoning aspect of it. Procedurally speaking, the comp plan informs the zoning, so we need to discuss what are the issues and what are the potential solutions, and then those would then direct how the zoning should be shaped. So that's, I think, although we're doing these in parallel, that's at least procedurally how it has to be done as far as a legal standpoint. Because at the end of the day, we need to update the zoning to show that it's in conformance with the comprehensive plan, that there isn't anything in the zoning that's preventing us from seeing some of those goals achieved. So, but certainly having, let's say, neighborhood commercial walkability, ability to walk to essential shops and services within various neighborhoods would be a comprehensive plan goal. I'm just going to throw this out there. Housing, residential housing, student housing, and the effects that has on local neighborhoods. I know that that's been historically an issue in the city, probably more so even today. Are there any thoughts or comments on that particular topic?
Sure.
Sure.
I think single-family residential homes should not be flipped to student housing. Or we ought to restrict student housing in some way to an area close to the university so that it does not expand and start to spread in neighborhoods all over the city. I think that's a detriment to a neighborhood lifestyle.
Well, and it's also a detriment to students who want to attend a university, like if you're living too far away from the university that, I remember being a college student renting and having to walk a significant distance, so did a lot of my friends, but I totally agree with you. I think that's something that should definitely be part of this plan.
We're beginning to see small 2-bedroom homes being marketed as student housing now. And I think if that spreads across the city, it'll have a very detrimental effect on neighborhoods.
It's not even small two-bedroom homes. The Hummingbird House is now
Yeah.
student housing.
That's not an issue.
And that's a gorgeous home. It used to be the home of the senator. A judge grew up there. It's gorgeous. It's a bag end inside. And unfortunately, the owners were running a bed and breakfast. They were right next to a fraternity house that they didn't like being next to, and they ended up giving up.
Mhm.
And they ended up renting it out to student housing. It's a shame. So, and that stuff can be handled in the zoning code. I also know the Livable Communities Committee addressed some of that, as the registration law that is supposed to address some of that. So certainly there's that. The other issue is addressing our housing shortage and allowing for not just single-family homes, like, accessory dwelling units, even accessory commercial units and stuff like that. Allowing a lot more variability in our zoning code, allowing our city to develop organically and adapt to what people need.
Yeah. We had a project in front of the planning board a couple of months ago for new apartments next to the Iron Gate Apartments on South Catherine Street. To build 12 units on that lot, they had to get, I believe, like 8 or 9 variances, just to build 12 units, because our zoning code is so restrictive with multifamily housing. So I think it's absolutely an issue with allowing that missing middle housing to occur in the city right now. It's hard to develop because of our zoning code restrictions.
Well, yeah, and then the only people that can develop are bigger corporations that can pay for attorneys and to apply for zoning variances. It prevents local people from becoming developers. And that's what's gonna help our city. Most of our buildings in our downtown were built between 1880 and 1920. They don't get renovated. A lot of them, they can't be renovated because there's parking minimums, and if they change the use, they're gonna have to tear down the building next door and build a parking garage or something like that. Luckily, the special assessment district has existed, and the planning board has been allowing people to just say, we have Dirt Street parking lot there. But there's a lot of issues, and you mentioned Eli's, that's a great example. They probably can't renovate or much too, because they're a non-conforming use.
Is this Eli's the neighborhood shop,
It is,
neighborhood
on
shop?
Sunset.
Yeah, and it's great having it there.
Absolutely.
You can walk the dog down there and, grab a soda or whatever, a bag of chips. And I see quite a lot of people use it, and, thank God it's there, because we're not that far from downtown, but it's a.
But it serves that neighborhood.
Especially since we get downtown, there's not really a lot of places.
There's
to
not a lot of
do
convenience
that.
stores now.
Yeah.
There's not.
Okay.
Along the same line of, residential, single-family residential zoning, I think, I agree with Patrick. I think you were talking about small auxiliary units being allowed on some of the lots that are fairly large-sized lots in those areas. But also, I think that you look at the transit areas that go through residential R1, and Cornelia Street, I think, passes through Bailey Avenue, and if you cut the other way, Beekman, Prospect, I think there's, the potential of having multifamily apartments on the transit routes through these units. They don't all necessarily have to be a single-family housing. The city really needs to expand housing stock in the city. We have extremely low vacancy rates in the city of Plattsburgh. And this could be a way that, without doing away with R1, which would be a hard thing to do, I think, in the city, but making some of these modifications to the R1's areas in the city to kind of see if we can expand housing availability in that area. And also to look at, mixed housing, developments that might have low income, middle income, whatever in the same development, I think would be an interesting strategy. I don't think we ought to be requiring it on developers, but I think our priority ought to be to have a sufficient number of quality, low income, middle income housing in the city, not just certain areas where there's very nice housing in the
Right,
city.
I mean, there are a number of bigger cities that do inclusionary zoning. I know San Diego does it, so a percentage of all new development is required to be low income. I think it's like 10% or something, which I think is great, but you're right, here, I think that would be tough to implement. But we could, do some sort of incentive zoning to, you know, incentivize people to develop units at that lower income bracket.
And I think that Patrick is a parking expert, so I'm not going to speak too much about parking, but, you know, I think we really have to re-examine use of automobiles and the, you know, how much parking is actually needed. Can you build, you know, a house or a unit, a two-family unit, and not have parking for everybody that might be there? So if you're saying the individuals in that unit, you may need 4 parking spaces. So we need to look at what do we really need in terms of parking that doesn't create barriers in the streets
Absolutely,
and
and I'm
things like that.
actually
But
called out Shalice right now because she did some background work, one of her classes she's taking, and she found some census data for the city of Plattsburgh and the percentage of people who actually have automobiles who rent apartments. And you remember that number?
Sure, yeah, total, it's 63.4% of city of Plattsburgh residents either own one vehicle or no vehicle. I believe it was 44% have one vehicle, and whatever that difference is around 20% have no vehicle at all.
So the residential demand isn't as high as I guess we think it is.
Nearly 2/3 of the city have one vehicle.
I work with people every day that don't have vehicles.
Which our code calls for, I think, what, 1 space plus 1 over, I mean, it's a crazy requirement.
2 per unit, and then if there's more than 2 adults in a unit, then it's another.
Yeah, it's incredibly speculative, and it requires you to make assumptions that no reasonable person.
Right, that there'd be a third adult.
You have to know who's gonna live there before you even build it.
Right.
Well, and that's what, I mean, in commercial, it's just based on square footage, not based on actual use, which is what the special assessment district does, which you know, greatly benefits people who have a lot of employees per square foot, but it's to the detriment of people that don't have a lot of people in their buildings or a lot of square foot. Which is why every expert I see, whether it's Sean Towns, whether it's Jeff Speck, or they're all calling for ending parking minimums. And I know that's on our list of reviewing the comprehensive
Sure.
plan. That kind of stuff makes no sense. It hinders development, it hinders changing uses because those things are kind of arbitrarily set.
Right, when a new use comes in, and then there's not insufficient parking based on the table.
Yeah, a lot of cities,
Right.
people want to change like something that used to be, I don't know, make stuff up, like a dance studio to and it shuts down, and then they want to make it into a gymnasium. Somehow the Institute of Transportation Engineers or whatever was being followed when that city adopted their zoning ordinances as different parking requirements. You are cut off from changing that use to anything that has a higher parking.
Or you have to get a
requirement.
variance,
Or you have to get a variance, or you have to buy property next door and put in parking, or build a parking garages. You're talking about 3 times the cost of the parking space, which goes from about 10,000 per space to 30,000 per space.
Yep. Okay.
So we're kind of in this first category of challenges right now. We've talked about housing market, student housing, 2 other suggestions that we had on there. With the suggestions, obviously, you want to hear everything. One of the first ones, lack of expansion opportunities. So obviously, we're limited with land to develop in the city. So just maybe some thoughts on that. Future zoning.
Well, a lot of these things, like Amy's talking about single-family homes, I mean, I personally think it makes sense to have, you know, as of right and not having to get a variance to go to the next step. Like, if you own a single-family home, you should be allowed to transfer that into a duplex or a triplex or something. To sort of, and not have it in control of whether you can get a variance or not. And that allows expansion without sprawling out.
Sure.
And the city only has 5 square miles roughly of land, and anything we can do with, and I talk a lot about getting permission from the state to adopt a land value taxation, so people feel like they would want to invest in their properties and not lose all their return on investment in a higher assessment when it comes due, so they can feel more comfortable investing in their properties. So I think a lot of the expansion can be focused inwards and breaking down some of these barriers so people don't have to sell, people don't have to tear down their properties to try to then get a variance to build new, but they can make these small changes as they see fit. And I think that can organically change a lot of the city for the better based on just more freedom for property owners. I think form use, or form-based code makes a lot of sense to prevent a lot of the abuses that can arise from that. But, and like you said, we do need some use zoning. Sure. No one wants a automobile garage next to their home they bought, but expansion, unless it's annexation, then there's not a whole lot of.
Well, something that comes to mind when I think about expansion is the Skyway Plaza. So I think there are a couple of opportunities in the city for infill development.
Exactly.
I mean, like you said, we have too much parking in some parts of the cities, maybe not enough in others, but I mean, we do have big development areas left over from the base, even some property probably on the, the old base, that do have development potential, and we need to look at what they're zoned now, what could potentially be there. But yeah, the Skyway Plaza is the first thing that comes to mind, like what can we do there?
Skyway Plaza, you could fit a bunch more stuff with that parking lot.
Absolutely.
What does infill mean?
Infill means instead of sprawling out to suburban and providing new infrastructure to build on the periphery, you're building up in the city, redeveloping, taking
Or-
parking lots, building buildings on.
Right, building where there's, perhaps building more stuff on a lot that's already developed, rather than developing a new lot that hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah, that
Jim?
Skyway Plaza is an excellent example of that. There's all kinds of open space there.
Absolutely.
And infill development's a lot cheaper because there's already electric lines, there's already sewer
Infrastructure,
lines,
right.
or less expansion. If you wanna build out on the periphery, you have to run sewer lines out there, which can cost millions of dollars for development, and you have to put an electricity substation out there. So a lot of places in the city already have those services provided to them or near them. Same thing with fire and police. If we build a new development out, obviously we're going outside of the city in this example, but out north of town, that's longer for the fire department to go out to, that's further for the police department to go out to, rather than infill development is close by, it's generally in the center of the city, but it doesn't have to be.
Mhm. To the point about infill development with regards to, you mentioned the ability of a single-family home to be able to transfer into, let's say, a duplex. In certain parts of the city, that's causing issues with, at least with the student housing, but perhaps that's something that the city would be interested in pursuing in other neighborhoods where perhaps it wouldn't be as much of a problem, do you think?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think painting it with a wide brush of saying no, changing a single-family home to a duplex or something is, I think we should try to focus on containing college housing and abuses of absentee landlords and stuff like that can be addressed rather than a blanket ban on, a higher use for the
Okay.
property. But maybe in certain places it will. I don't know.
Okay. We don't have to figure out the answers yet. This is to figure out really the questions. But so in general, looking at, trying to contain or control the student housing whilst allowing more flexibility for other parts of the town or in the city to be able to have that more flexibility, in other words, in general?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's certain places in the city that would vehemently object to, getting rid of the R1 designation in their neighborhood. So, I think cities like Minneapolis have adopted now getting rid of all R1 housing. That's pretty controversial there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that, eliminating single-family housing zoning designation would probably stir up some controversy, but it's something to at least explore, perhaps in certain areas. Okay.
Staley Avenue is a great example that we don't have R1 housing there. And Staley Avenue is a very eclectic street. My house, either side of me, I have single-family homes. One more down, there's actually an apartment complex that used to be a single-family home that one of my neighbors grew up in, actually. And, the backyard in Staley Avenue, we have very good backyard. backyard, so the backyard was turned into a parking lot, and then it was expanded to apartment complexes. And there's obviously costs and benefits. Certainly, I know one of my neighbors had problems with, a lot of neighbors being right there, the building isn't necessarily all that great, and there's been issues there. But certainly the other aspect of that is it allows a lot more people to live in the city. It helps meet a need,
Mhm.
especially for low income people, and so certainly there's trade-offs, but I think a lot of these trade-offs can be adequately managed to include or increase the housing stock in the city, because we have, I think our vacancy rate is 2.2%, insanely low.
I don't know if this applies to this conversation today, but one of the things I'd like to see is fewer one-way streets. We have many, many one-way streets, and I believe they were designed to get people commuting from outside back outside as quickly as possible. And I would prefer that we build neighborhoods where people want to live so that they don't have to commute so far, and that we become, less commuter oriented and more pedestrian friendly and all those good things.
And bike friendly.
And bike friendly, yes.
Yeah.
When you drive up Margaret Street, you look around and you see homes and everything, and when you drive up North Catherine, or I'm sorry, Oak Street, going out of the city, then it's a speedway. You just, the goal is to get through
Get on the highway.
the intersection
Get
before the
people.
light changes so you can get on the interstate. And I just like to see all that go away. That's not necessary anymore.
Yeah, no, there's a huge movement right now with downtowns to take back the streets. So it's to, move away from car-oriented to more pedestrian-oriented, which is all about the walkability. But it's also about placemaking too, right? It's harder to get people to come downtown to shop now because of internet shopping. So you have to make places to dwell, places to be, make it a social scene. So there's a huge movement to take back streets, which is exactly what you're saying.
I think along the same lines, we built all this parking downtown to accommodate commuters, and it prevents development downtown also. So it's something we need to look at.
So one comment I will say about that, I agree with the fact that our zoning ordinance requires way too much parking for development, but at the same time, the city is the cultural hub for the region, which is pretty rural, right? So people have cars that drive here, so we do need to accommodate some parking. We can't, I get your argument, we can't get rid of all parking minimums, I don't think, because we do support a big rural region that does need to drive into town. We do want to attract them to downtown.
And we don't have a lot of public transportation that's
Exactly.
readily available to everybody. I mean, we have the cart bus, but
Yep.
that's not running as frequently as, let's say, the public transportation in Burlington, for example. I don't know what they call theirs, I forget. Those green buses you see all over the city.
CCTA.
There you go.
That's a great focus, though, is public transportation.
Yeah.
The lack thereof, right? I mean, we could, make an action item to partner with Clinton County, public transportation, et cetera, to improve the system for downtown.
Well, and I still like this idea that, I'm going back to this statement you made, Melina, about the 15-minute neighborhood. If we created opportunities for neighborhoods to have things that they need, and then encourage more biking and walking, it'd be so much less reliant on driving around, and we wouldn't need the parking, and we could have the development that would bring more into us, create a stronger tax base. I mean, that's really what I think this whole plan needs to be, is how do we promote more development so there's more growth, so there's a stronger tax base, because that is the problem that we face here with all the tax exempt property we have. And then the taxpayers are picking up the burden of what is tax exempting.
And we have to reverse the trend in every rural city in the north of declining population. So we need to be mindful. We make it difficult for people to live here one way or the other. We're going to only accelerate declining population. Affordability is important.
Mm-hmm.
I was advocating a couple years ago for tiny house neighborhoods and for the input, having tiny houses and backyards and all that kind of stuff like they're doing in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Just create more neighborhoods and more reason to be here, because we're we're bucking the trend to try to, you know, we're gonna see a big, I don't know if I sent something around you from the Rockefeller Institute or whatever in Albany today, but because of the COVID and the census, we're gonna see or at least our numbers of population maybe decline to 17,000 after the next census. And it's been actually going down. That's a little hidden secret. And then when we try to create 115 new housing units downtown, look at the challenges we get. But this is a matter of survival to get people to start living here again. It's not a nicety.
I wish I knew the percentage of students from Plattsburgh State and Clinton community or out of town that actually stay in the region. I bet it's a pretty small percentage. And we have an issue with retaining that skilled workforce. So I mean, with all of the opportunities that we can provide, I mean, that's the whole point of this comp plan, right? Is to try to grow our population, retain that workforce, keep people here and wanting to live here.
But there are lots and lots of jobs with the new industrial, work that's happening, the development that's happening in the town. And there is not a workforce to fill those jobs. That's been true for years now.
Or the housing to support those people.
And
Yeah,
that's
well,
exactly
that's
it. I
yeah,
mean,
that's right.
and so I'm just gonna comment briefly. I'm watching all kinds of homes go for sale in my neighborhood up in Ward 3, and they're being sold right away.
Quickly.
People
Crazy.
want to live in the city. We have to really embrace that. People want to live here, and we have to make that. I mean, that's really, I understand that's really what we're doing. We're trying to figure out, development, people want to live here. People want to live in the city. Like every time I see a house go up for sale in my ward, I'm like, oh, another one's up for sale. Well, it's not up for sale for long. Those houses are selling.
Actually, Melina, your point about retaining SUNY students in the area, that reminded me of a meeting that Ethan and I attended at SUNY for one of the DRI projects about a year ago. And at some point during the meeting, and there were 25 students in the room, they were asked how many plan to stay in the area once they graduate, not a single hand went up.
Really?
Yeah.
On that, sorry, if you want to finish.
No, go ahead. It's better retaining and better communication with the college and letting the students, doing a better job of letting the student body know, the benefits of living in the city and the things to do and just a more collaborative relationship.
On that note, one of the questions we had was, we do have representatives from SUNY on the committee, a student and a professor. We were hoping to include that community in some of the discussion. We wanted to see if you had any thoughts on, how much inclusion you would like to have. I mean, I think obviously students today providing input may not see those results until after they graduate and they've gone on, but perhaps it's a valuable source of input is what their perception of the city is and how we can try and address for future students.
We also have a Plattsburgh High School student on our committee, which I think is really cool because obviously all these planning efforts they're not for us, right? They're for future generations. So we thought it was a really great idea to have a Plattsburgh High School student on to give their perspective as well because they're also the people that we want to retain, right? Instead of them going to college and moving away.
That's a good point, but we also want elderly people, because it's really important to keep our elderly here and not moving to North Carolina and Florida.
Sure.
Yeah, even if they go away from college, we could get some coming back.
And to your point, which is another reason there needs to be more availability of things that people need, like grocery stores, pharmacies, walkability, so that there isn't a need for, if you're an elderly population, you can be more self-sustained and get around and be active and things like that.
And now make a pitch, I think, for recreation along with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to look at 15-minute walks, if you're an elderly person living in the various neighborhoods in the city, how far is it to walk to a park? And is there anything for you to do at a park? Many of our parks are aged, I think, unless you play baseball or Little League or
I think it
whatever.
would be a great idea to identify in this plan the need for a recreation master plan, which I haven't found. I mean, we might have a really old one, but I haven't seen one, so I think you're right. It would be great to identify the need for a recreation
Right,
master
yeah,
plan.
our parks don't serve handicapped children or adults or elderly. So we have a long way to go to reach out and provide a great opportunity for somebody to improve their own health by walking to a park that has something to offer to them.
So
I
in
think that should be a
Burlington,
priority for the city, and along with the environmental efforts that the city has made, the environmental stewardship that the city has here, that should be a key thing that we're working on to continue to not just get the city green with moving cars, and whether it's Priuses becoming police cars or whatever, but those are the ideas that need to be on the table to look at how do we really make this a place that's desirable for somebody who wants to live in an environment that's healthy, the air is clean, the lake is here, the views are beautiful, and how do we maintain that over the next 10, 20 years? And, you know, what do we do to make that, what's our stewardship responsibilities, I will say, for that as a city?
so in Burlington, when you, I'm not sure what direction it is, if it's east or west, but if you're going, if you're parked at the King Street area and then you're gonna go up towards the beach, on that walkability path, they've got stations for basically, you know, activities to do. And there's a dog park, and I know Patrick has been clamoring for us to have a dog park for years. So, you know, you go for a walk, you can take a little activity, you can do a little activity, you've got a place to walk the dog, it's beautiful. You've got that entire lakefront to look at.
Well, yeah, I was about to mention this at the risk of sounding like a broken record, that we don't have a dog park or a playground within easy walking distance of downtown. If we want people to live downtown, we need some recreational opportunities, and the waterfront is open, it is there to do. We should already have a dog park and a playground down at the waterfront. If the farmer's market's moving down there, that's great, we should have bathrooms down there. And then anyone who lives downtown can easily walk down to have a dog park, a playground. I know splash pads have been mentioned, a pavilion. It's gorgeous down there. I know the water treatment plant down there is down there. I know John Ruff has been working very diligently to help mitigate that. But there's a lot of area down there that's just underutilized, and I know we've been talking about it for years now, about making that sort of where we have events. The stage is down there.
Yeah, we
By
need
the
to,
way,
it
the last
needs
of
to be
those
an event
concerts
destination.
is tonight, and it should be great, like, you know, that needs to be the destination for downtown. Anyone living downtown can go down there. Anyone who wants to go to the farmer's market can use the dog park, have their kids play at the playground. Anyone who wants to go to those things and drive down there, there's enough parking, and then they can have dinner or lunch at our downtown restaurants. But our restaurants are really the thriving force of our downtown these days, because like you said, retail isn't really, you know, none of those retail establishments that were there in the 1950s are really gonna come back, I know. So if we can have activities and things of that nature, events should be done for the waterfront.
And especially make them open air events, because it's safer.
Let's keep our city affordable, though. We've got a high poverty rate. If we make this too attractive to people who have a lot of disposable income, we're going to be forcing out people who can no longer afford to live here. Or the retirees that are on fixed income. So affordability is important too. It's easy for us, you know, we can afford this stuff, but a lot of people find their city already too expensive to live in. And I know there's going to be an awful lot of views in the community. If you broaden this out to the greater community, you're going to have all kinds of people in the town of Plattsburgh and Peru and Beekmantown telling the city of Plattsburgh all the amenities that we really need to use our taxpayer money to invest in. Let's focus on, always remember that those on lower income in our city and not price them out of this market.
Well, that's the beauty of the dog park and playground, it's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Right.
Free
Really?
use.
Free for the public, right?
Free for the
There's
public.
And outdoor.
great opportunities for.
On the topic of, you had mentioned the vacant retail, one of the points we wanted to hit here is the vacant commercial space in the city. I assume that's more of a problem issue now with the COVID epidemic, that's probably been taking its toll on places. Any thoughts on vacant commercial space?
Doesn't
Yeah.
our current code, if you're building an apartment building, you can't have commercial space on the first floor?
It depends what district you're in. You can't have residential on the first floor in a commercial district. It's the
Residential on the
opposite.
first floor?
No residential on the first floor.
I knew there was something, the first floor.
There's a question about it. Is the zoning such right now that there's only one primary structure allowed per lot?
Yes, that's correct.
That's something that,
So density, yeah, increasing density, allowing increased density is absolutely something we need to look into.
and to address vacant commercial spots, I love the community development office. And I think that that's one of the few offices that the city should work with and actually expand and increase in size. So they actually have a reach out program to other small businesses. For example, I have a second floor that I'd like to develop,
Sure.
and I could even expand to a third floor.
So the city does have some revolving loan funds and some CDBG grants, but like you said, unfortunately, we don't have the staff right now to implement those programs. We do have them, they're just kind of sitting idle at the moment, so absolutely that can be a focus
Because I
to
think
small
that
business development.
create your development, create your growth.
Yep.
Everybody's looking at the downtown 109 unit process, but in reality, if the community development office was able to increase in budget, increase in size, and have staff that says, hey, let's reach out to the small businessman, go knock on the door and say, we see you have a second floor, could we help you develop it and
Sure.
take you to that next step?
Yep.
Just a brief history for me, I worked with a man named Dan Cayenne, who was the community development office 50 years ago. And Dan came to me, and we made a plan that converted the building into a 14-unit apartment house and 2 retail spaces. From that step, we were able to expand to another location and create another business. And now we have 3 businesses, 20 employees, and 33 apartments
That's great.
from Dan and the Community Development Office C. And I really believe in the Community Development Office. And I think that it is short staffed, and that's one place I think that should actually be grown and do a reach out program for business, because I know most small business owners would love to do it. But I think we had somebody discussing how they were scared of all the process and all the paperwork. And it needs to be able to spoon feed the businesses and say, here's what we gotta do, we'll work with you, we'll help you. And I think that alone will be a growth pattern for the downtown. To be able to say, here it is, and we're here to help you.
Absolutely.
And to educate the downtown businesses, or property owners, I should say, into what's available for them. Because, even like with myself, I'm working right now, I'm putting in 80, 90 hours a week at work trying to keep things afloat. And even when things aren't bad, I'm still working 60-hour weeks. So I would love to expand, I would love to grow, I would love change, I would love opportunity to help and expand, but I don't have time to go to the community development office and say, okay, what's here for me and what can I do? And then have a folder dumped in front of me saying, here you go, fill these 25 forms out and come back. If the community development office had larger staff, more people, they could say, here, we can help you, this is what you need to do, and this is how you start. And I really believe in the community development office, big time.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and then you raised a good point, like one of the biggest opportunities we have to expand our housing stock is mostly buildings in our downtown, the 3rd floors have never been finished.
I just found that out a couple of years ago when the DGP program first started. I didn't realize how much vacancy was on those 3rd floors, of like false 3rd floors. It blew my mind.
Yeah, if you walk downtown
On
at
Clinton
night,
Street especially.
Clinton Street especially, but Market Street too, if you walk downtown at night, you won't see lights on those
Yeah.
3rd floors below.
On
Kathy
the
Hope
second
will
floor,
address
my
it
building,
as
my
one of her,
building is
yeah.
9,000 square feet, and the whole second floor is a false front.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I had a roofer come to me and said, Steve, instead of fixing your roof, we should just put another floor on and put apartments in. I said, really? He said, yeah, it'd be very easy. Matter of fact, when we had the facade program, the contractor who did the design made an entrance, said this is where the entrance could be for the 3rd floor. But yet I can't afford it.
Well, there's, yeah.
Out of curiosity, why do we have these vacant 3rd floors?
That's a great question. I
I
imagine
don't
it's,
know.
Yeah, it's largely a result of the local rental rates not being able to support the cost of furnishing those floors.
the return on investment is too long,
Yeah.
especially when your assessments go up.
But that goes back to your point, we had a community development office that could promote small business loans, facade loans, et cetera, to help these people create those apartments and that housing stock. It all
It all ties in.
One thing that DGP was meant to address, Kathy Hochul, was one of her 10 things, making the third floor, finishing off third floors in buildings. And, I know when the original DGPs were handed out, most of them were granted to people that were bringing vacant apartments online. Because there's a huge amount of housing stock in our downtown that is not being tapped.
Are these spaces, the third floor, is it primarily commercial or residential?
They would be residential, but they've
Would be.
never been finished. I looked at buying a building 3 years ago on Margaret Street, and we looked at it, and the third floor was never finished. It was humongous. You could have fit 3 apartments in there, 2 big apartments in there.
Interesting. Okay.
I want to go back to a little bit, some more of the environmental, but in Ward 1, if you look at the old base, what I would call the old base, we've got 2 beautiful spots there. Sailor's Beach, which was, kind of a problem this past few weeks, but also the old marina, that was the officers' beach. And, you're not going to find a prettier spot on Lake Champlain than either one of those 2 spots. They are hardly used by people. Most people, if you went out and asked them where Sailor's Beach was or where these others, they don't even know that these places exist on the base. And I don't know how we come up with some kind of strategy to take advantage of that waterfront space to turn it into an attraction for people. One is hard, Sailor Beach is hard, there's no handicap access to get over to that one. But the other one has roads that are there.
And I think that's part of a bigger conversation and plan that we've had a few conversations with the town of Plattsburgh. They're developing the Battlefield Memorial Gateway Park at the old Clifton or Jetties, which is literally right next door at the southern terminus of the Terry Gordon Bike Path. So to have them develop that park and then us, put some energy and focus into those 2 parks and then connect the Terry Gordon Bike Path to that new Battlefield Memorial Gateway. It's just it's a destination. It's a trail that would connect 3 separate parks into downtown. We've also had conversations with the Clinton County Historical Association, which is there on the base with their museum, and we just think it would be a great connection to have interpretive signage all along the Terry Gordon Bike Path about the region's history, connecting that Battlefield Memorial Gateway all the way to downtown, which then ties into the historic signage and branding and placemaking that we're doing right now with the DRA efforts. So we definitely have those conversations, and I think it's a great focus.
Well, I'd really like us to look at from, you talk about where the Gateway Park is and the Terry Gordon Path ends, all the way down to the end of the city beach.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
that whole waterfront is
Yeah.
huge. It's got to be 4 miles.
Squandered right
3
now.
miles of waterfront.
Mhm.
And even the beach has been neglected in the past, so, there's work that needs to be done there to bring that up and improve the desirability of people from Montreal not to drive past us to go to Lake George and stop here. But it doesn't stop there. Scamotion Creek that comes down, nobody goes in that area. That beach is just as good as the city beach. But anyway, you just keep going down here, and how do we take advantage of that?
All the waterfront
What can we
opportunities, yeah.
develop as waterfront activity for people? It's just an absolutely tremendous resource for the city, and it's a desirable draw for people to live here. And so I would put that down as one of the issues I'd like to see us look at anyway, as we're thinking about long-term planning.
Absolutely.
I
Maybe we
agree.
should do an inventory of all the underutilized properties like that. And we've got tens of acres of land just sitting fallow on the old base where I think people should be living there so they can enjoy a beach that is also lying fallow, et cetera.
Sure.
Well, if you look at the museum complex on the base, these are, I happened to take a tour through the Transportation Museum and one of the other buildings. I didn't go in the building that the police department is storing some things in. And they were interested in whether the city was going to be willing to invest, to help them rebuild this building and fix the roof and all. And, I walked out of there saying, you're talking about $3 to $5 million worth of investment to try to bring this building back. And it's really not suitable for a transportation museum at all. And they need to start thinking about, I really think we ought to have that museum but there are other places where it's probably better sited, like next to the airplanes, and put an airplane hangars type building that's open on the inside. Something like that that would actually draw people and look appropriate in that area.
Yeah.
And these buildings are cinder block buildings. There's no historic nature to them. As the mayor said earlier, if those are taken down, a developer could come in with some fantastic ideas about what to do with, what did you say, 10 acres or so of property, this waterfront property.
I do love the concept of a museum campus, so having the transportation museum, the, Battle of Plattsburgh Museum, the Children's Museum, all in one location on the base, which is next to the recreation trail, which is, in line or with the historic trail in the downtown. Like, it's all great concepts, but you're right, it's money. But this is the whole point of the comp plan, is to identify all these big projects and goals, so that when we go out with the grant, we can say, hey, look, we identified that in our comp plan, give us the money.
Well, unfortunately, most of the inside of the transportation museum has been returned to donors, so not much left in there.
Keep in mind the opportunity cost though too. Somebody can give us some money to fix something up, but if that facility could actually be much better used for another use,
Right.
just because you're given free money, it's not necessarily free. You have
Oh,
to
it's never
give-
free, yeah.
Yeah, to look at the opportunity cost of what else could also be there instead.
Sure.
Could I just add one more, and I'll be quiet for a while, but I think we need to look at the transportation corridors that come into the city and through the city, and how do we improve the visual appeal, for example, along these corridors, so that when people come into the city, it's an inviting, interesting kind of drive, just drive through the city if they're
Right.
not staying here.
Gateway improvements is huge. I live in Cumberland Head, so I take Route 9 through the GP, welcome to Plattsburgh sign every day, and every day I shake my head and say, God, that looks awful. So yeah, absolutely, gateway improvements is something we really should focus on.
One of the questions we had thought of is, did you want to include any sort of an outreach to the town of Plattsburgh to coordinate on these corridors? Because they're really shared corridors in many senses, as far as how to coordinate on issues such as complete streets or adding bike lanes or just physical improvements.
I think as much as we can, we should.
Yeah.
We could have a bike lane going all the way out to the malls. It'd be nice to have a sidewalk going out there, but it's built for cars, and that's it at this
Yeah.
point.
In the town's smart growth plan, it was a focus on changing that Route 3 corridor into more of a town center, and obviously, adapting complete streets. And they did some renderings of Route 3, what they want them to look like, propose to look like, and I think their intention is to send those to the DOT eventually, because the DOT hasn't redone that corridor in, I believe, 10+ years, so it's gonna happen soon. So hopefully some of those smart growth concepts and complete streets will happen in sidewalks.
One of the things that came to mind when Ira was talking about, removing old buildings and building new buildings. In my neighborhood, we had a house that was condemned, and I guess two things could have happened. Well, three. It could have stayed there and rotted, but a developer bought that property, and it was large enough for him to build a 4-unit apartment building with parking in the back. So the facade in the front really fits in well with the rest of the neighborhood. It's all single-family homes, but that quality development in my neighborhood made it fit in. It fit in well. In contrast, a house next to it burned, and they built a single-family home there, and they're both nice homes. The 4-unit apartment building and the single family, but it's hard to say which is nicer really. They both fit in. So I'd like to see maybe a list of properties that are distressed or abandoned, and have some plan waiting for those.
Sure, I remember a while ago, a couple of months ago, having conversations with the building inspector's office about a vacant building registry, and where to go from there. And we can absolutely identify in a comp plan that we need to do that and pursue
That's a
that.
good idea.
I think
I
Joe
like that.
has a list of,
Well, we started on one.
a list of abandoned properties yeah.
Might be helpful to talk about a schedule for different types of inventory. This should be done every 3 years. This should be done every 5 years, you know, recreational facilities versus dilapidated buildings, that kind of thing.
You know, that's Matt, you're bringing up a good point. So the Plan BTV comp plan that I sent you guys a link to, and another one that I printed out. I sent those because I not only like the content, but I like the way that they're laid out. So not only do they identify a vision for Burlington, but underneath those visions, they identify goals of how to reach that vision, and then action items of how to reach those goals. So that, you know, what Matt just said, that would be an action item to reach that goal. And I love the way that this is laid out, and I hope that our company looks similar to this, Michael.
Point taken.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the same thing when I read it.
Well, I'll come in again and look at the north end of the city, and once you cross Scomotion Creek and you go north, there's nothing there but wetland. And it's not, I don't believe it's all wetland. You know, it used to be the city dump when they burned stuff, you know, back in the early 50s. But to explore what can be done with that property besides leaving it standing there. It's been, you know, I don't know if there's been any environmental studies done on it, but you know, there ought to be something that can be developed along that area, along with the Crate Center. Has a huge parking lot that sits right at the exit of the Northway. And there's potential with that portion of that parking lot and some of that land that butts the Route 9 and whatever it is, the road that goes out to the city beach. But to look at that property and figure out what we can do with that, and what can we do with the, you know, we have that path that goes down towards the beach.
The Heritage Trail, I love that trail.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful trail, but that is an extremely valuable piece of property.
I agree.
You know, is it been designated as a park, and so that there's, you'd have to do an alienation process to do that? But look at that piece of property. It is, you know, those are $1 million lots almost all the way down there. I was there when Carl Brancato in the city was the urban redevelopment of the North End, and moved all these families out of there that were low income, blue collar families that lived on what was called Scomotion Avenue then, which is where the trail runs.
Okay.
And they were all evicted out of their homes by eminent domain, but the city took those property for commercial development.
And they never did anything
And then
with
no
it.
development took place. You know, I knew a number of those people when I was a young kid that lived right along that beach, and yeah, that was a fantastic place, and it still is. But there's nothing going on from that place all the way over to the beach to figure out how that can be developed in some way as an attraction to bring people to Plattsburgh to use the beach, or to have something that draws them there besides the beach.
Water park.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know what you can do with that property.
I will send you a couple of documents. The city did do a beach feasibility study not that long ago. Actually, Saratoga Associates did it, and they have a couple of different concepts for that whole area, and I can send it to you. But we can also obviously identify in our conference.
But it's you know, it's an interesting piece of property.
Yep.
That could partner with Beatmantown. I think they own the other side of the road, don't they, on Route 9 going out of there?
Town of Plattsburgh.
Town of Plattsburgh, yes. We can annex it.
We have 15 minutes left, just,
Oh, wow, already?
yeah, yep.
Jeez. Okay, well, I was just going through some of these sort of agenda items and trying to figure out what we haven't really touched on yet. We've jumped around quite a bit. I mean, one of the, I don't think we really touched on, but it is highlighting the heritage and historic aspect of Plattsburgh, and trying to leverage that as from an economic tourism standpoint. Obviously, infill development kind of serves toward that if we can repurpose some of the older buildings. But I think as far as leveraging it from an economic standpoint, if there's any thoughts on that.
You know, one of the things that strikes me is, I mean, we all know, you know, what some of the historical markers and buildings are in the city, but there are certain neighborhoods, you know, like McDonough Street, Macomb Street, and you walk through there and you know those are old buildings, and they're beautiful down there. I would love to see, you know, highlighting some of that. I love the signage that was done, to, you know, be sort of like old fashioned. I thought that was fantastic. But I totally agree, there isn't enough focus on the heritage, the historic, looking at neighborhoods. But I think that's untapped, and I know that's also part of what John is working on with the water treatment plant, is taking a look at what is it going to really look like. What is the character of the building going to be? Is it going to look like, you know, an historical building? Is it going to look newer? That kind of thing. But I think that would be important too.
And I think we need to move beyond the War of 1812.
Yeah, right?
What's that? Sorry?
You know, that there's a lot of other history in the city that is interesting. I
Agreed.
mean, I was just talking to you about disposing all these people that lived on North Margaret Street, and where did they go? What happened to them? But it's a whole story about redevelopment and its impact on families and social networks that has, you know, it would make an interesting kind of, if you're walking on that trail, you want to know something about the people who lived here before you came and what happened to them. Bailey Avenue, Penfield Park, and that was the fairgrounds for the city, and, you know, they have all kinds of information about Bill Cody and the Buffalo Bill Show being here, and, you know, all kinds of activities that took place in the past in this area that nobody knows anything about. So there are a lot of things that are historic and that are not quite as historic, but more modern in terms of urban development and its impact on people and what we learned from that as a city, that, you know, provide for a variety of information boards, or whatever they're called, to be put up around the city that would provide interest to people that are walking around the city.
I just recently went on vacation to Maine, and in Bar Harbor I was walking around, and there was a bunch of interpretive signs there were colorful interpretive signs of pictures and history about, you know, that specific location or house or whatever it was, and they called it Museum in the Streets, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah.
So you followed this path, and it's called a Museum in the Streets.
I like that.
Yeah, and I just love that. And one of the DRA efforts that we're working on now with the Laura Gunner Group is an interactive map, which will highlight some of the key locations in downtown that are historic, and actually create different trails that you can follow. Like, say you're interested in Queen Anne Victorian architecture, like this is the trail you can follow through downtown to look at some examples of that.
That's a great
etc.
idea.
So we are working on that, some different history trails through downtown.
So Burlington has something called Cycle the City. It's a 10-mile continuous trail, and it takes you through the Intervale, it takes you through the Ethan Allen Homestead, it's got places to stop and you know, read up on local history. I see that as something that we could also tap into. If we're talking about, you know, bringing up, really focusing on all the various history of the city, that would be a great opportunity.
Especially with part of the Empire State Trail coming through downtown, we continue back after that, and
Yes.
cycling trail.
So there's a common thread among a lot of these topics that we've covered. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I wanted to come away from this, or if there's one topic or subject that we absolutely need to focus on, it's almost like the theme of the comprehensive plan. You know, what would it be? The common thread that runs through a lot of this stuff is, you know, is kind of economic growth, economic redevelopment. But I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just not sure if that's necessarily the best focus, but in many ways it does address a lot of the issues that we've talked about.
Yeah, I'd say maintenance is another very important one. Like, we talked about the beach, and the beach studies, and the air rapid mentioned, so a lot of like money that's gone to the beach. We have a village beach, the northern bathhouse has been closed for 8-9 years now. You know, and it's becoming more and more dilapidated. The southern bathhouse isn't doing all that great. If I go to any of our parks, things, and it's hard to get grants to hire workers to help maintain.
Because
these
that's a
things here.
ongoing,
Yeah.
it's an ongoing subscription cost, if you will.
Exactly, and the way the system is set up, you have to get grants, and you have to pay consultants, and you have to, but certainly maintaining what we have, and, you know, is such an important thing, and I see the crate centers on here, you know, we haven't talked about it. You know, we have a study, I think it's from Saratoga Associates, saying that to fix the crate, it's gonna be $3 million. To tear down the crate, it's gonna be $2 million.
$2 million, yeah.
You know, like, it's those things, but the crate's unique in this county for the most part. And, you know, city gym is the same thing. We walk around that track and there's sometimes a garbage can in there collecting water. One of our racquetball courts has been shut down because there's growing mold in it. And it's hard to fix, you know, it's hard to fix once they become so dilapidated. Also, I mean, you have to make them ADA compliant to get in there and stuff like that too, which is hard for these buildings that were built in
City's old.
1830.
Right.
Yeah, but, maintenance is something that we see a lot, and we gotta work at maintaining what we have. Because the biggest example for me is that northern bathhouse at the beach. It's the biggest building on the beach, and it's, you know, 8 years is a long time, 9 years is a long time to collect bird droppings and stuff like that, and it probably can't be renovated now. Or if it can be, it's gonna cost tremendously more than it would have cost
If the maintenance had been.
Yeah, every year over the past 9 years, it had gotten the due diligence it deserves, and it's not any one person's fault or no entity's fault necessarily, but there has to be an obsessive focus on maintenance. Or things just get way more expensive.
I do remember hearing this before, a couple of years ago, and we hear the same thing in many other communities. A lot of people say, why are we bothering fixing up this thing, this park, this sidewalk, this whatever, if, you know, the city or the town isn't gonna take care of it? Because the city and the town haven't been taking care of these things, and that's a recurring theme. So I think developing a revenue stream that would be dedicated to something like this would be something we could try and focus on.
Similar to that.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the answer.
Right.
It's-
Well, we're not allowed to come up with the answers today.
No.
Because, I mean, part of this is, and a large part of why we're having this conversation right now is to kind of set the groundwork for the public meetings. And I don't want to come up with any necessary answers until we've also heard from the public, because I think that's an important element. They're probably going to raise some of the same issues and some new ones. So we have to try and kind of take everything together.
Can you be mindful, going back to Melena's point, of our cities are the only city in New York for 100 miles, so it serves a really broad hinterland, but figure out ways for other entities to partner in things like the Crate Center, et cetera, so it's not, there's not just an expectation that the 19,000 city taxpayers really need to create the quality of life for a 250,000 person region. I think we really need partnerships, because we recognize just about every attraction we create is almost a 3-county attraction. And it's not just for the city of Plattsburgh.
And I'll end with one comment, going back to what you mentioned about a student and professor from the university. I think we really need to long-term look at what a partnership between the city and the university will look like.
Absolutely.
And what are the benefits to the university, to the city? Where does the university see itself in this city of Plattsburgh? As well as the student body. I mean, they're spending millions of dollars every year when they come into the city. And you know, what would they like to see that's not here? You know, and you know, it's I think figuring that out and having a conversation at some point. You know, we can do this and maybe get the mayor here to get a conversation between the council and some of the governance body at the university to have a separate conversation, even to start this going. It's been a long time since, I don't know of an active partnership that was there that laid out a longer term strategic plan for the university and the city, and such an important part of the city. We can't afford to see that
Yeah.
disappear in some way.
Ethan attended Plattsburgh State, and he was telling me that when he was in school, he had some friends that had no idea that we even had a beach here. And that's just an example of sort of the students not really being involved in the community as a whole. I mean, that's obviously not every student, but I just thought that was a good example.
Ethan, you're the one guy who stuck around.
Yeah.
did?
Yeah, like Plattsburgh, so I
Thanks,
stayed around.
Ethan.
Is that 0.001%?
And he wasn't even from Plattsburgh originally.
Right. I think we're pretty close to 5:30, so I just wanted to say, this isn't the end of this process. As you know, Michael said, this is kind of a first step. We're gonna be meeting with the planning board, the zoning board, our public advisory committee, and then the public in general. And we have Councilor McFarland and Councilor Barbell on the public advisory committee, so they'll serve as your liaisons and report back to you on the progress of this comp plan update and zoning ordinance update. So this isn't the end for you guys. You'll still be part of the process all the way through.
Well, I wanted to thank you.
That's the good
I thought you
and
did a
bad.
great job trying to pull out this information from us. And,
Yeah, it's tough in a short window of an hour and a half. That went by way too fast, or at least for me. I don't know about for all of you. But it's part of the challenge of getting as much information as we can to roll with. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Of course, if any of the council members have further thoughts on this after this meeting, please transmit them through the mayor's office to the CDO, and we'll make sure they get in the hands of Sarah Zoning Incorporated.
Okay. Thank you.
We've got about another 5 minutes. Is
Oh,
that
that's right, I got
who's gonna hear me?
Find my agenda. Now, is there any old business before this council, or the committee? Hearing none. Is there any new business? Hearing none, then I'll accept a motion to close the Governor's Strategy and City Operations Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Next roll call.
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Brody?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything you'd like to do for the work session before we begin our official session at 5:30 p.m.?
I would like to, I'd like to ask Chief Ritter about this purchase order. So this dollar amount here, is that the same dollar amount? Because
This is what you showed me earlier.
yeah, so is it an exact match for the dollar amount because of the transfer and
I believe so.
Are you talking about the 2 police cars?
yeah, so Richard, is this the exact dollar amount on this purchase order that lines up with the amount from the resolution last week?
Yep,
That's all I wanted to know.
it makes it, $91,000 for 2 cars.
That's correct.
That's what's available.
I know
91,
Melissa-
908, 08 or something?
Yep, I just wanted to make sure.
I know Melissa got a picture today.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to offer your committee reports in the work session, beginning with governance strategy and city operations?
We've just completed our meeting and nothing further to report. It's on video if people want to hear more about this, and I hope they do look at it.
City infrastructure, Councilor Moore.
Yeah, we just completed our paving projects for this year, Lafayette, Pleasant, Williams, and Wacom, and we all selected the streets in there. So we've done a great job, and I thank Public Works for the great job they've done. So just look at what we're doing.
Finance and budget, Councilor Kelly.
Just happy to report that a few members of the council and you, Mayor, and Chamberlain Marks met with Moody's today. Moody's Financial Services
Not
to,
with whom?
pardon?
Not with whom?
Moody's Financial Services to discuss the city's bond rates. And from what I understand, it went pretty favorably.
I think so, yeah.
Good to know.
Public safety, Councilor Gibbs.
So we had a meeting yesterday with Chief Ritter, and we also had a meeting yesterday with Chief Lawless. Ira and I have decided we're going to meet. Are we still meeting tomorrow, Ira?
Well, 4:30.
4:30. And we're going to put together, he and I are going to sit down and put together all the information and start looking at recommendations, and we will be reaching out to you, Mayor, to have those discussions for budget.
Thank you. And MLD Board President, Councilman McFarland, and Public Library while you're at it.
So I'll start with public library. As you know, we've discussed the public library. It serves a wider population than the city of Plattsburgh. So they're actually pursuing donations, all right, and I think they might be putting on their Facebook page or their website, I haven't seen it yet, a place for people to actually give directly to the library. I know their craft supplies that they're sending out, they have reached out on Facebook with a wish list on Amazon that if people want to help resupply their craft supplies, they can help with that. And the municipal lending department doesn't know updates at this time.
Thank you. Any additional reports at this time?
Mayor, we had that potential executive session, do it now or later?
Thought I'd do it just once the meeting starts. Start the meeting in time anyway. Seeing none then, let's begin our common council meeting at 5:30 today with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Councilor Barbell.
Here.
Councilor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Gibbs.
Here.
Councilor Brody.
Here.
Councilor McFarland.
Here.
Councilor Moore.
Here.
I understand there's an interest in moving into an executive session regarding issue of ongoing litigation with the city and with the town, and also litigation on a piece of property tax certiorari case involving Georgia Pacific. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Barbell, second by Councilor Gibbs. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passed.
Where are we going? Are we going in here?
Oh, I'm there, sure.
In here?
Order one or order two?
Hey Beth.
Hey, John.
Can you put Oprah on the screen so we got something to watch?
No,
No, you don't have the technology?
no,
All right.
we don't have TV here.
How you doing?
Good, how about you?
Living the dream.
Yeah, we turn that off now because we really didn't have any presentations. I thought he was presenting.
How are you today, Tanya?
And DC's the electronic.
Yeah. I know the last time I went, my father took a pretty good thing.
Well, this is the people care, the lady, this is what it's gonna cost you.
Yeah.
We looked at your mouth and it's like, okay. We actually got to open my mouth.
It's the same thing as you go to, get your cards. Generate work. I think it's the same thing.
Well, it's the mask.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Get hot.
Well, they started all that stuff. Breathing CO2 and everything.
You go to sleep.
And that's not that important to me. You know, they just keep going, try and get the bill.
So did you hear him? It must have been yawning too loud because Dean was talking.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so anyway, that's. How are you?
I'm doing good. You know, touched around the garden today. I've seen it. Took a little nap with my puppy dog. You know, just
Very busy day.
Well played.
That's what I'm getting ready to do. Yeah, I'm doing all the prep work for them.
They're part of the meeting.
It's like, oh, gee, yeah. Wow. Yeah, hour and a half long, I thought.
So I counted at least 4 times our phone calling today.
Really?
Just about.
Same thing.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
here was one of the program phones. Is this really something that you should be on?
Yeah, that's a sad day.
Yeah, it is.
You know, these critters were such a integral part of your
Okay,
family.
Exactly.
Just-
So give your dog a good surroundings when you get home.
He has no life.
Cereal or something. Or
Well, you know,
one.
it's sitting a long time, doesn't have another dog.
He hasn't, I don't think he's going to live anymore.
So I just had
Yeah.
her for, he hasn't forgotten about
Yeah.
3 years.
He's not even
We'll get another one, so we got 2 of them.
Yeah.
We got one year-old, 1 year.
back
And that's.
right on.
That's right.
Yes, they're good buddies, yeah.
That probably just Jesus.
So you're ready to go for one?
Yeah, painting. Yes. I unloaded some more stuff in my bedroom when I went home at lunch. Yeah. And then I got a ladder, and to be able to get, because we had a little bit of a high ceiling. So Sylvia last night was Matt and his daughter, our daughter was over for dinner, and the kids. I said, so you know, Matt goes, do you need a ladder? I said, no, there's so many rows. I bought a 9-foot ladder. He goes, you do not buy a 9-foot ladder. I'm like, it says 9 feet on it, I'm going to get it.
Good, Jesse, how are you?
So I go over and I went and got it. Oh, thank you.
Okay, stay awake a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sir, thank you very much.
So I went and got it and brought it out, and I had my granddaughter went to Lucy all the time. I'm like, Lucy, go back up. Daddy, that number is 9. So she went back out and said, oh, I told her to. But then you read the small print, it says, based on a 5'6" person with a 12-inch reach or something like that. So, like, oh, okay, so I stood on the ladder to show them downstairs in another room. But so she's like, what do you mean, touch this thing? I'm like, this doesn't matter. This isn't what I wanted. But I tested it this morning. I put some tape on the ceiling where I wanted it. And I was able to get to that point, but I think there's another peak area that might not look dead. So I'll make my husband finish that little piece.
It's been that way for years.
If I get most of it done, then I'll be happy. Because that I can put everything back. He just
You know, they get these.
Well, of course I should have let him because he fell off the ladder. Should have probably let him on there.
You know, like, one of the big things.
It was funny. It was
I would like to talk about.
behind the ladder. I'm like, it's a
Yeah.
Yeah, I found out. I was wrong.
Back then, it was the same thing.
He was right.
He
He goes, I didn't know you wanted
scratches their head. And now you do what?
behind where Dean is.
20 years later.
Did you have garbage or you put yours in your box?
Yeah. It's been.
Yeah, so we'll see. But I'm painting. I'm
Anybody
painting.
need more?
No, thank you.
White chocolate, recently. Yes.
I hate white chocolate. Yeah. Well, my son loved white chocolate.
Well, it hasn't been figured out.
I figured better than feed me candy all these years.
Yeah.
About time to reciprocate, right?
The only reason I took it off my desk is because I was eating too much.
Lifesavers.
I had to take it away from myself, sorry. Can't bring it anymore.
We got a stash out there, but I have to contribute.
Yeah.
Don't live here.
Yeah.
Actually, it is, isn't it?
I wonder if this is the origin of the 15-minute workplace.
Exactly.
We get it covered, that's right.
sorry, I'm sucking up the air conditioning over here. I'm not sharing. There was like no air moving over there. I don't have to stop for dinner because Sarah might invite me over for dinner. Not that I would cook myself. Or I didn't cereal. I don't cook. So, yeah. I just hope my paint covers and too cold. I don't want to have to do corners. Yeah. You woke up? It's like the second time I've done myself. My husband went away 5 years ago. I went to Nicaragua for Mission Hope. I would do projects. So I painted that one, I painted that room, and then something else. And then the other ones. But I have to be really ready to do it. I can talk myself out of it. Be like, nah, I don't want to change that.
If is there an extra copy of the agenda?
Yeah, they're out there. Is there still some left, Sonny? Yeah, they're out
I
there.
walked right by it.
Yeah. Somebody was sneezing today. Oh, it was Jill. She was sneezing today. I'm like, what is that? No, me, I'm fine. It's just a cold. I can swallow. I know. Well, it's can't. It makes everybody second guess yourself all the time now. Well, my little grandkids were playing in the pool. I'm like, what are you guys playing? Playing COVID, playing the cure. This is a 5, 7, and a 9-year-old. You guys are watching too much. Has your daughter started back, or do they start back this week until next week? This week, yeah, because I think the city, they're starting back next week. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, Sarah took our little granddaughter's gonna be kindergartner. She only had 5 kids in her day. Like they're splitting them up. I think there's 5. Maybe they do it 2 sessions. I'm not sure if it's 2 days. You know what I mean? Well, I mean, so it's a small group in each class. She goes 2 days a week, which is only 3. So that'll be kind of hard. At least they're all on the same days, though. They did make sure that all the kids in the all the same, like the elementary at least, maybe not the high school. I guess you would still want all your kids to go to the same day if you're in high school. It might be easier for the parents
Yeah.
to keep track.
Well, even from the school perspective, but the
Yeah.
family.
Oh, right.
This, I can't verify this, but I was told that traditionally twins get separated in the school if they're not the same teacher. But now we would want that because it's less infections.
Right. So we're in the same group, yeah. Interesting. Remember when my husband was in high school, he was in Town. He said they improved my event too. They did split sessions. I don't remember why. Maybe it was a bus. They didn't have buses or something. Too many people. So they would go. He would like. I think they didn't even. Some of his siblings didn't go at the same time he did. And he had 5, 6 siblings. So some were going. That's what my mom said. She said she had some going at night, like from 3 to I don't know what it was. 6 or 8 or whatever they did. It's weird. Some in the morning she said track. Yeah. A few things. I didn't know they have to do exactly. Yes. That's a little select. For what? Oh, chart. They said charter. I'm like, I'm over here.
No, general fund balances. Well, we better start going down because of COVID.
Elevator music, yeah. Yeah.
They have a bunch of laptops sitting around the table, you could also open them up and start looking for games to play.
food, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I go for the food.
Stay overnight, relax.
Stay overnight, presidential suite, jump in the hot tub.
Yeah, relax.
Anyway, but yeah, they're open.
Turn that off on your way back, please, Dean. Dean, turn that off on your way back, please. Thank you. That's not.
Sure, you want to talk to me after the meeting? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
We're back. We were in executive session to discuss the two matters of pending litigation we mentioned and one matter of potential litigation as well. Where are we on the agenda? Mayor's comments. I do have a report for you on overtime. I'm happy to share with you any of the details if anyone wants to look at it. I can give you a summary. And July and August, total overtime is $135,000. Most departments actually had no overtime. The most significant overtime would be fire, followed by police, followed by MLD. Keep a note with MLD that much of their overtime was a mutual assistance where we are reimbursed. It was going down Hudson Valley after a major storm. I'm happy to share with you the details and the narratives from each of the various department heads as you wish. Councillor Moore had mentioned the great work DPW had done. They've done 10 or a dozen roads already this year. They often complete the road building around this time, the last 2 or 3 years since we adopted this strategy, and then they find that they saved money on the budget and find another road or two to squeeze in. I wouldn't be surprised if they came back with 1 or 2 more, but they've done an incredible job. I really encourage you all to look at Lafayette and Pleasant and Williams and Montcalm, just beautiful. Lafayette's just a beautiful avenue now. I'm really proud of the way they do that. John Ruff is working with me and potentially with SUNY Plattsburgh. You might have read in the paper that yesterday SUNY Plattsburgh started doing pooled sampling. And how pooled sampling works is it really allows them to leverage their testing resources very well. They'll take, let's say roughly 32 samples from students and then put them all the samples through a machine to test. And if it comes back positive, they'll retest half those samples. And if that comes back positive, then they know they've narrowed it down to 16. If it comes back negative, they narrowed it down to the other 16. So it turns out that they can find the person of that 32 in about 5 tests rather than 32 tests. So really about multiplied by 6 the number of entities they can test. So they're managing to really test everybody at the campus, all the students at the campus in pretty quick order, doing this really innovative technique that they're helping to spearhead with SUNY and with New York State. And our idea is to go one larger, to start doing COVID testing at our wastewater treatment plant from the incoming sewage. And then if we see that there's a pretty high load of COVID, we can even start doing it in neighborhoods to try to narrow down where a COVID infection might be in a particular neighborhood, because COVID can be found in fecal samples. So I think that we're going to try and team up with the hospital, SUNY Plattsburgh as well, to do some pretty innovative testing regimes and really try to keep our community as safe and infection-free as possible. So that's all I've got to report today.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on August 27th, 2020 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Barbell. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending September 2nd, 2020 in the amount of $57,680.38 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Moore, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. In addition to my report and your committee reports, are there any additional reports you'd like to offer this time? Seeing none, resolved report says list are hereby ordered received and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs and seconded by Councilor Barbell. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondences, recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills added by the common council for the week ending September 4th, 2020 in the amount of $504,949.06 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and seconded by Councilor Barbell. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. There's not an awful lot on the agenda tonight, but we do offer this opportunity for any of the members of the public to please come address the council on agenda items at this time. Seeing none, please continue.
Motion to remove item 7A from the table.
Moved by Councilor McFarland, seconded by Councilor Barbell. All in favor of motion to remove?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion of the actual item itself. And by the way, I'll give you a little bit more background. Chief Ritter was able to speak at length with the head of the PHA, Mark Hamilton, and narrow down that rather than having an individual police officer essentially appointed to PHA, they would be purchasing a set of services from you for $31,000, and you would be able to leverage the additional time or even divide some of their services amongst other people at the police station. And I know you want to hammer out a more formal, concrete contract on that, but I think this would allow you to free up resources and ensure that there wasn't any issue of a subsidization or paying for a fee that didn't represent the true cost of the services provided. So that's something you probably ought to mull over, and that discussion has been had, and we can finalize the sets of services they would like for that price. And with the goal of, I think their intent was, what can $31,000 buy us? And Chief Ritter felt that they could buy them the things that they believe are essential.
Well, I'd like a lot more discussion on this before voting on it tonight, quite honestly. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about it. Since that's our committee, I would like to maybe set aside some time to get more information on this before voting on it, but that's my opinion.
I think it's a great idea, essentially, to, use a portion of a patrol time or wherever the hotel is going to be assigned within your department to, and then serving the housing project any way we can, that with the amount of money that they're going to offset in that patrol officer's salary. I think that's a nice balance where the housing authority is never going to come up with the full cost to have a full-time officer on site. And to not do anything, I think, would be a mistake. It seems like a good compromise to me.
Well, I know Elizabeth spoke to Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I had a pretty lengthy conversation with Mark last week, just to get an understanding about what does the officer do and what they handle. And I was going to ask him to come to the council and speak to, I don't really feel like I should rehash what he told me because it's so extensive. And I didn't know what that officer did until he explained it to me, and he was able to explain all the various ways that this officer assists the whole housing community, not just a particular group.
Right.
But again, I'll leave that up to the council to make the decision, but I certainly would like a lot more information before voting on this.
I have a question for Chief Ritter, if that's okay. Is the same person who's been employed at this task going to continue doing it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's your intention, to keep the same person?
Yes.
Can you tell the council what he's going to do in his other time? It sounds like it may be 50% in housing and 50% on other police duties. Is that correct?
I mean, that's the formal idea, but I really have to talk with the director of PHA before I can, other patrol-related activities.
What would be your plans for this person, this officer, when he or she is not at the housing authority?
Well, I mean, it's not specifically at the housing authority because some of the function is gonna be at the PD as well. But we're talking about the hours that would be structured for the essential services that PHA needs.
So we would need a new contract then?
Well, so that's what the overall intent is. I mean,
A new contract is the new intent, is that what you mean?
yeah,
Or-
completely restructured.
So we would have to see that, or,
Yeah, so I'm confused. We're talking about, the mayor's suggestion was a new contract. Elizabeth's suggestion was to table it and then vote on the old contract next week presumably, or get more information.
or get more information before we vote at all.
Well, the resolution says there is no change in the contract provisions or reimbursement
So
costs.
that, just to clarify, that was the contract, that was the resolution from last week.
Right.
It was based on a specific contract. If we did want to fast track this, I do have some language which you could use to amend that resolution to reflect this new paradigm. Or alternatively, we draft a new contract and then do it more formally.
Okay, so then we would vote this one down.
Well, rather than that, if you want to move tonight, we could amend the language to reflect.
But I haven't seen the new contract.
It's not drafted yet. No.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we can't approve a resolution for a new contract that we don't have in our hands.
You could approve I mean, I'm not gonna read it right now unless you ask me to, but there's some basic tenets that we would include, and then it would be in a form approved by Corporation Council. So it would basically hit these necessary elements, and then the basic contract language would just be under my review.
I don't like to work that way. I want something complete and formalized before we vote on it.
Are
So
you
that I can-
suggesting that we vote this down then, now that we've taken it off the table?
I would suggest that we table it again, if this is what we're talking about doing. We table this again, and then if Mr. Hamilton can come next week, we can evaluate whether if the way the contract was written is better, or the way this amended contract, after reading it, we can compare them and decide to vote this down and adopt this newer contract, or decide to vote that down and adopt the old contract.
Yes, I agree.
Chief, is there any urgency to get this contract done this week versus next week?
That's not really for me to decide. I mean, we are still gonna provide service to the PHA.
Right. With or without the contract, you're gonna be providing services.
Correct. We're just talking about specialized things.
Nobody's gonna be unemployed because of this.
No. No, he's still an officer on the force.
Well, I don't see any reason that we could wait till we get the contract in. It seems like everything is okay for now, right? By seeing that,
So I'd like to make a motion to table this.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved by the Common Council of the City of Plattsburgh, the retention and disposition schedule for New York Local Government Records LGS-1, issued pursuant to Article 57A of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law, and containing legal minimum retention periods for local government records, is hereby adopted effective January 1st, 2021, by all officers in legally disposing of valueless records listed therein. Further resolved that in accordance with Article 57A, only those records will be disposed of that are described in the retention and disposition schedule for New York Local Government Records LGS-1 after they have met the minimum retention periods described therein. Only those records will be disposed of that do not have sufficient administrative, fiscal, legal, or historical value to merit retention beyond established legal minimum periods.
Moved by Councilor Barbell, and seconded by Councilor Brody. Discussion?
So what is this exactly saying?
This is what the clerk had described to us earlier today.
I was late, sorry.
We,
in 1989 adopted the MU1 schedule, it's a record retention schedule that the state requires for a minimum timeframe for keeping certain records. It's been replaced with the LGS 1 as of August 31st, so we have until January 1st to adopt it, and it's combining the CO1 schedule, the MI1 schedule, and the MU1 schedule. The CO schedule is for counties, the MI is for miscellaneous, and the MU1 is for city, towns, villages, and fire districts. So it's a revision and compilation of all of those.
Thank you.
Would this streamline some of the records that you're having to keep now? Will it reduce the number of records that you have to retain, or is this kind of a wash?
It's not, it's just a new way of formatting it. Some record retentions will be kept a longer period of time, some shorter. It's kind of a one for one.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Brody?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the
I'd like
request.
to waive a reading of item number 7C and move the resolution.
Moved by Councilor McFarland, second by Councilor Barbell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion of the item itself. Roll call?
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Brody?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
No trouble request at this time. Are there any resolutions for initial consideration?
I have one issue, and I'll state it as pursuant to the city charter, section 3-8. The Common Council does hereby appoint Brian S. Kremer of Goldberg and Kremer to conduct an investigation on behalf of the council into the chairperson of the Zoning Board of Appeals, hiring of a law firm from Buffalo, New York on or about April 24th, 2020, in connection with the Durkee Lot mixed-use development project. Mr. Kremer shall have all the powers of the council as set forth in City Charter, Section 3-8, except that he shall submit proposed subpoenas to Council Member Barbell, who is hereby authorized to sign same on behalf of the council. For the services of Mr. Kremer and his law firm in connection with the investigation, Goldberg and Kremer will be paid at the rate of $335 per hour. Well, I was gonna give him a raise.
If you wish to consider that today, you'd have to invoke Rule 4 and briefly discuss the financial implications of this matter.
I'd like to invoke Rule 4, Mayor, and discuss the financial implications of this resolution.
Do we have a seconder for invoking Rule 4?
I'll second
Councilor
that.
Gibbs, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then maybe briefly discuss the financial implications. I think you already addressed the salary or the hourly rate. What kind of total hours would you expect for an investigation of this sort?
It's difficult to know at this stage, but it's a fairly discrete matter. I would anticipate not including travel time, which I believe Mr. Kremer charges a reduced rate for, would be between 10 and 20 hours, I would estimate.
So $3,000 or $4,000. I think you're doing this for an issue that already has cost the city, or has been billed, at least not cost the city, billed to be determined of $18,000 or so.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is just to deputize our labor attorney to conduct the investigation that I called for last week.
I think that's correct, yes.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Brody?
No.
Counselor McFarland?
Sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Is there any new business or council reports? Additional council reports?
Couple of questions. We talked about working and getting employee appreciation, and we're supposed to work through the Human Resources Office, and I haven't seen anything yet. Also, we were talking about Am I right or no, John? Look forward to that very much, it's good appreciation. And then I also noticed, on the bright side of life, we've got about $350,000 to the plus side in our budget. Is that correct? I saw that, I was reading the email.
Yeah, that's right.
That the employee pensions is not as bad as we projected.
And also, I believe we're gonna see an accelerated payment for an audit I'd asked for of telecommunications providers. If you recall, the council accepted a settlement that would spread that payment out over a number of years, and now they're willing to pay that payment all in one shot. And I think that's somewhere just over $100,000 as well, so a couple of bright spots. That's very nice.
Is that the Prime Link? Yeah, that's already been received, $107,000.
Terrific.
But it's no bump to revenue recognition because of the payment stream already being recognized for revenue in the accounting we did back in January. But the cash is in the bank, which is very good news.
Yeah.
107,000, that's great.
Thank you. Any other new business or council reports?
Yes, Mayor, we were presented with a couple of reports from the Community Development Office concerning the Saranac River Trail Phase 2, which is basically the two bridges across the Saranac River, one at Pine Street and one at Durkee Street. And it seems as though over the years this project has ballooned in price. It started off, as I recall, as being a $2.1 million project, and there have been delays, no doubt, which makes it more expensive, of course. But it's a total now, as I understand it, if you include the interest on the bond payments, it's up to $7 million, I believe, if I read that correctly, Matt. Am I right on that?
No, that's not correct. The total for all phases of Phase 2 currently totals $3.984 million. The council would be bonding out, what's the final figure, is 1.2 million?
Yeah, $1,263,363 is the new amount to be
Yeah.
bonded, which 588,267 was appropriated last year. And the new amount is the additional rebidding of the contract this year. There's
Yeah.
574,000 already in serial bonds that the city's paying the interest on.
There's about 1.6 million from the feds, $500,000 from New York State Parks. So the total remaining cost to the city to complete construction would be, as Rich just stated, about 1.2 million. And the council has already authorized borrowing all the $382,000 of that.
Well, according to the schedule that you sent us, public improvement serial bonds, is that for all capital projects?
No, that was put together to show the council the difference in what the total serial bond issuance would look like if you approved construction of SRT2
Okay,
versus whether you didn't. So all of the other improvements that are lumped in with that issuance, they are in both of those calculations. The only difference is in the top one, SRT construction costs are included, in the bottom one, they are excluded.
okay, so the SRT2 is going to cost $1.2 million, it looks like, in addition to the $587,000 that we have.
In addition to the 574 that's already in place.
574.
Total bonded cost for the city would be $1,810,000. And the bond resolution that was put in place in 2016 was for $2,570,000. The city
Okay,
anticipated, paying a lot more of the contract back then for the building of it. I think additional funding has come up.
Yeah, at the time that was passed, the federal funding was not in place and the New York State Parks grant was not in place, which is why they
Right.
set it at 2.5 million.
so the city's on the hook right now for $1,356,000, is that correct?
The amount that's been spent thus far is about $593,000.
if this project is to be built, the city's costs are $1,356,000 when it's all said and done. Is that correct?
Total will be about $1.8 million, but again, about 590 of that has already been spent, and if the council decided not to move forward at this point, that 590,000 would become a sunk cost.
Is the $587,000 we have in reserve, has that been used to cover this $590,000 figure you're talking about?
So the 593 that's already been spent, that was the first capital project, Rich, that's about $230,000.
Right.
And then, since then, engineering costs and bridge removal costs for the old Saranac Street Bridge, which is how we get to the 593 that's already been spent.
Okay. I commend you and your department, Matt, for putting together a really, really good report for us that describes how this project is going to enliven the nearby community, and I think that's great. Except in your report, you admit that, you know, the enhancement to tax revenue doesn't match the cost of the project, so the public still bears the cost for this project, and I like it. I live near Pine Street, so it would be a real boon to my neighborhood, but I have a real problem putting the entire community, most of who will never use these bridges, on the hook. And I also wonder about the maintenance cost over time. These are metal bridges, and they will require painting occasionally and other types of maintenance, I'm sure, and we don't have a budget for that. I'd like to see just what, you know, somebody's estimate as to what it might cost to maintain these bridges over 20 years. I think we might be shocked, but okay, that's all I wanted to say. It was going to be on the agenda for this week, but it's such a large figure. I just want the public to be aware of what we're purchasing on their behalf, and to be able to weigh in and talk to us about how they feel about that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And if between now and next Thursday, if any of the councilors would like any additional information, please just reach out to my office through the mayor. We'd be happy to provide you with anything else.
No, I don't know.
To Matt's fairness, he did offer a couple of days this week to also enlighten you. I know where everybody
Yes, he did.
people.
Yeah.
He did.
I just
But
couldn't-
I thought
it
it
didn't
would
work
be
in my
better to
schedule,
talk
sorry.
about it in public session so that the public can understand what we're about to do here.
Matt, I don't have the report in front of me, so I could be wrong, but I thought the report said that 622,000 had already been spent.
593 has already been spent. The $622,000 figure, and I don't have a report in front of me, I don't recall what that referred to specifically.
That specifically identifies 48,000 of bonding on the first project out of the 230,134, and the 574,000 that was already bonded on the construction.
Okay, so that's the money that's already been approved to be borrowed and has actually been borrowed.
It's already been, that's right, already been borrowed, already debt serviced. The balance of the 230,134 in the first phase of the project design phase, if we don't go through with the project, that balance of 182,000 has to be sent back to the federal government.
That's correct. And that's something else the council should, factor into their decision making.
So there'll be a shortfall between the amount spent and the amount returned, 280,000?
If we decided not to move forward with phase 2 at this point, the 182, which we've already been reimbursed for, out of the $1.6 million in total federal funding, because we didn't complete the project, the feds would want that money back.
And we could add that to the bond resolution, to add that to the bonding that we're gonna do. In other words, instead of putting in the 1,263,000, just add the 182 in. The difference between the two figures that, Matt was just describing to Councilor Kelly,
Right.
because we don't have the 182 to actually just pony up and send back to the it's been spent.
But the whole bond overall will go down $1,700,000.
Down 1,263,000, back up 182.
Just a point, we do want to try to bond this month. We believe the favorable conditions for bonding, I wouldn't want to put it past September. I'll give it a little bit of time, but that I think is the only issue holding up our bond and the completion of the Moody's rating.
That is correct. And I think Noah said today, I didn't get to finish the conversation with you, gents, but I think he said, the 23rd
Right.
would be the outside.
That's where we're aiming.
23rd, so we, if we decided by next week, it would be perfect timing to get it done by the 23rd. Be a sale on the 23rd of the city farm.
So I would recommend this be placed on the agenda for next week for us to vote on. But there could be some more lengthy discussion about it next week as well, as our counselors study the report you sent us.
It's a very large amount of money.
Yes, it is.
Any other new business or additional council reports?
Yeah, I have a few. First, I've gotten some constituent requests, which I agree with, to put a crosswalk in at the parking lot on the west side of Route 9 and North Margaret Street, connecting to Edgewater Estates.
Wasn't there just a crosswalk put in for McDonald's recently?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
There was.
It's down the road quite a bit, though.
I know, I think our planner brought that very issue up because the request had gone to her and she had recommended, if I recall, Mr. Miller, that it wouldn't be prudent for traffic flow to have two crosswalks in such a narrow area. Am I correct?
I don't recall that specifically. I would have to check with Milana.
I don't recall. I was going to bring it up at the infrastructure meeting, but I remembered it now. So I thought I would bring it up so I don't forget on the infrastructure meeting. A few other things. One is I saw some articles in the paper regarding the vote on the SROs, claiming that we made that for political reasons, that it's recent. Anyone here knows that these have been things that certain councilors have felt a certain way. I myself, for at least 2 years. I know Councilor Bargo and Councilor Kelly have done that too. So to suggest that this is in some way political seems rather ridiculous to me. But certainly people can think that. The other thing that was
Patrick, can I add to that comment?
Yeah, sure.
So, just as evidence for how ridiculous that claim is, I reached out to the mayor today because it was my question about giving the school district some items from, was it light poles or what was it exactly, for the Webb Island Bridge?
High efficiency, low energy consumption lighting, part of the program we do to allow people to become energy more efficient. We've given the school district a number of such grants, but one including the completion of the Webb Island Bridge.
Yep, so we did that. Crossing guards are in the public safety budget. We pay for that exclusively. We get no reimbursement from the school, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this idea that we're at war with the school district is ludicrous, and it's an unhealthy statement to be made, pitting one entity against another. I find it completely unprofessional, unfounded, and it's nothing more than character assassination, and I don't care for it. We've worked with the school board. We, like I said, we've just got 2 examples right here. So to paint us in this villainous way is completely unfounded.
I think that I recall, and I haven't read the paper, but I recall in some of the discussion amongst the councils that you were accused of making decisions because of their stance on prime and the IDA, the pilot agreement. Please, the public needs to understand, pilot agreements are made with the IDA at the county level. Every major investor has a right to go to the IDA and request a pilot. They will ask us our opinion as part of their deliberations, as they ask the school district their opinion. But this has not been an issue of the school district fighting with the city over the pilot or over prime. This is a separate body. So to somehow intermingle even battles that they are having with other entities and somehow having them characterize us just is very bizarre to me.
Oh, yeah, and the other issue there, I mean, there was also a claim of lack of transparency, which seems like a sort of catch-all term. If I disagree with you, I'm gonna blame you for lack of transparency, but we've been pretty transparent. I've been very open about my position on that for 2 years running. I
Yep, you
stated
have.
my position on it at the council meeting. I was open when I brought it to the public safety panel and see if they wanted to weigh in on it a few weeks ago. The other thing that was mentioned, I believe it was mentioned that Elizabeth and I have some sort of animus towards police. I don't know what Elizabeth's feelings are towards that, but just because I'm against SROs and have been for years, and police being in schools does not mean I have some animus towards police.
Right.
I have not made any statements.
I haven't either.
derogatory towards the police. I have a good working relationship with the police. I have a lot of respect for our police officers and other police officers. Just because I don't think they should be in schools does not mean I am negative on police. And so I wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, and I agree. I've made it very clear that I'm not standing on this defund the police stance. I'm working on this Public Safety Citizens Review Panel on behalf of the council and with Chief Ritter, and that is simply not the case. It's a false accusation against me, so.
Yeah, and I don't know what they were, or what the person was referring to with our statements against the police.
I've never made statements against police.
And in that same vein, there was the county planning board last night, and I spoke there last night because I'd never been to a county board on any board meeting. And I was a member of the parking committee, and I'd heard a lot of different things about parking. I was asked if I could speak, and I did. And I talked about the difference between the parking plan and how that it's also based a lot on not just the number of parking spots downtown, but how parking works and how a managed parking system can help address some of those issues. I also said I'd be happy to answer any questions and address any misinformation. And someone sent me today that on the PCC Facebook page, that it says Council City Representative Patrick McFarland, as usual. I don't know what that means. This is the first time I've ever spoken at any board, so I don't know what as usual means. Spent his 5 minutes blasting the public and correcting what he called misinformation. I didn't correct any misinformation, nor did I ever blast the public, nor have I ever blasted the public. They seem to quote me here, saying, "You're wrong, you're stupid, you're lying, you're misinformed, and nobody should listen to you." I don't know where they pulled that quote from. I didn't say a single thing in there. And then they go on to say, talking about restriping the county building parking lot in 65. I never talked about a county parking lot. So I've never said anything about the public, and I've never said that they're lying. But clearly everything in this post is a blatant lie. And I don't know who wrote it, but I do feel sorry for any member of the public that listens to that dribble. And I also, obviously I couldn't comment on that thing, they don't allow me to comment. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Any other reports?
Well, I'm going to follow up on the SRO a bit as well, because I've had a number of people contact me about it, I've been pretty straightforward that even before I was on the council, I spoke to this council about being not in favor of SROs in the school system. I did learn, however, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I've been told that the school cannot move to hire an SRO that is an armed individual without going through the law enforcement agency, be it the city police department or the sheriff's department. I have no idea whether that's accurate or not, but it was a new piece of information that was provided to me that I haven't had time to kind of check with anybody about, but hopefully I will probably follow up with Chief Ritter about that, unless you know right now that that's an accurate statement.
I'd rather talk with you offline.
Okay. But that's a new piece of information. And it surprises me, and probably concerns me, that the school district chooses to kind of write articles in the newspaper and complain about the city's decision on this, but doesn't show up to have a conversation with us about, they think we were wrong, here's why, what they do. They allowed Chief Ritter to come over here, but Chief Ritter is doing this through us as a service to the school district if we were going to do it. I'm absolutely surprised that the school district has chosen not to contact the council, not to have a conversation with the council about it, and I don't know how you go forward to kind of do anything about it if one party doesn't talk to the other. So.
Well, I did reach out to the superintendent.
I know, you reached out to the school.
I reached out to the superintendent and asked to talk to him, and I called it in the spirit of clean slates, and he declined.
I'd just like to add that I have an acquaintance who's on the school board currently, and he called me on Sunday, I think it was, and he said, we're amazed that you didn't talk to us. And I just thought, at first it didn't occur to me, but later as I thought about it, we didn't really, this is one of those resolutions where we didn't have a lot of back and forth discussion before the meeting, and quite often we do, as you know. But on this one in particular, we didn't really talk much about it. I know Patrick contacted a few of us, but it just shows, I believe, that there are many, many reasons why SROs in schools are not appropriate. We all have our own beliefs about that. And all those beliefs coalesced in that meeting last week. And that's how we ended up with a unanimous decision. And, that doesn't always happen either. So I was just as amazed and surprised as the school board, I think, that we did, in fact, decline the contract. I still think it's a good thing, but I was just totally amazed that there were so many points of view expressed last week, and all of them valid, and just made a very, very strong case for not endorsing SROs. So.
And I think it's an important point to make that the public's perception is that our no vote means that the school district cannot obtain any SRO at all. And in fact, what they can do, instead of coming through the city police department, they can go through the county, and they can still obtain SROs. I made a public statement. I was asked for an interview earlier this week, and I did make a public statement, which is, and this was one of the reasons that I voted no. It puts us in the middle, and it becomes politicized. And I feel like they should go the same route that other school districts do. And it's exactly what happened. It became politicized. And I think it puts us in a position that I don't think we should be asked to be put in. So and that's an important distinction. They can still pursue SROs, but my no vote means I don't think that the city council should be put in the middle of that. And then you can read for yourself the articles and interviews in the paper, post-vote, which exactly confirms what I said, which means those decisions become political. So I hope, and I still hope, like I said, I reached out to the superintendent. I hope that there is a pathway forward and a meeting that we can have in the spirit of clean slates to go forward. We are not sitting around, wringing our hands, trying to find ways to create pain against people or other entities. That is wrong. It's false, and it's not okay to say that. This is not the way we operate. This is not what we do. I think the public needs to understand that, and I think the school community needs to understand that. We're not sitting around trying to devise ways to create pain for them, because good grief, we have a lot to do. And that is not one of the things that we are spending our time on.
I think certainly we all have various perspectives, and I think you all come to your conclusions, thinking these things through very carefully. It'd sure be wonderful to live in a world where we could simply respect each other and sometimes disagree without having to turn it into becoming disagreeable. That's what I think is really sad in some of my observations and all this. Even at this table, we sometimes disagree, but we always treat each other with respect, and we never try to demean each other. But I guess that's just not the world we apparently live in anymore. But I think you should always strive to raise the bar, and I think you always have.
I just want to add one other comment in closing, I guess, and thank all the counselors for reading the materials that were sent out to you on the comp plan. And I thought it was a pretty, healthy discussion and raising a number of issues. And I think it'll provide a good foundation for Office of Community Development and Saratoga Associates to move forward in developing this plan. And I'm sure both Councilor McFarland and I will be bringing back to you information from the meetings that we have with them to update this information. And anyway, I thought it was a good process that we went through. I thank you all for taking the time to do that.
Any other new business or council reports? Any closing public comments on any topic of mutual interest?
Good day, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. My name is John Seaton. I live here in the city. Basically, what I would like to say, when it comes to the development or any development, we all want the best for our community. And that process of getting the best, make the cream come to the top, is vetting the project by many eyes to look at it, so when the day is done, we end up with the best possible project for our community. We all want the same thing. I guess we just want to get there in a different way. I was on the zoning board for 20 years, and through the 20 years being on that zoning board, there were some hot button issues, and we certainly had the availability to bring in our own attorney or any other expert because we're an independent board. Same as the planning board. They're an independent board and have the right to ask for any type of representation or experts. I watched the YouTube of this meeting last week of the issue of the zoning board's attorney bill. I've known Ron Nallin a long time. He is the salt of the earth and he loves this city. He wants the best for this city. He's a man of very high integrity. And I want to commend him for having the wherewithal, because let's face it, if we're anybody watching those Zoom meetings, watching the barrage of Prime with their attorneys and their experts, it was overwhelming if you were on that zoning board. Zoning board members, like planning board members, are dedicated citizens in the community that are donating their time. 90% of what comes across the table of these folks is a porch or a driveway or a fence. And they're very nice, sweet people, but when you're talking about a mega project of $24 million, they don't even know what they don't know. I think the mayor and this council owes that to any person that is volunteering on any board, to give them the tools so that they can have their experts at the table. So when the day is done, the cream comes to the top and we get the best project that we can get by vetting it properly. So I'm asking you, you folks are the applicant as well as Prime. It's not a good look kneecapping them right now because that camera is picking up everything. Everybody out there is seeing what's going on, and I think you need to take a good hard look at that, because at the last end of the meeting, the mayor said, this $18,000 bill is a half a person for a year. Well, the additional money that's being spent, that basically, they have the right to have any attorney that they want. And I'm sure your corporate counsel will tell you that. Or any other expert. It's just the way that it is. They're an independent board, and you folks are the ones that have picked those individuals to represent us. And they're all good people. But let's face it, the majority of them are out of their realm, and they need help. So that, again, we can get the best possible project for our community. So, you may not like what the attorney has to say. It's not getting rubber stamped that maybe you were hoping it was going to get. But as I think everybody here can agree, that some of the changes, whether it's the setback or some of these other things, it's being vetted, and you're going to get a better project when the day's done. So please, you don't want any more controversy? Nobody wants controversy. Let's pay the bill. Let's move on. I'm afraid if you don't pay the bill, I think what you're going to see is that board is going to say, we're not going to proceed until it gets paid. And nobody wants that. We want this all to have a natural conclusion, to be vetted, and let's get the best project for the community. I've been a developer here in town a long time. I want development, you want development, we all want it. Let's vet it, let's make it the best that it can be, and thank you for your time, and let's face it, we're all in this thing together.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm Jesse Filer. I'm the head of because no one else would do it, of Friends of the Saranac River Trail. And I'm not going to speak very much about it tonight, but I just wanted to raise one point that I think is something that I have done wrong on this project. And I beg your indulgence on this, because it's something about the way I operate on certain things. I am, I think, reasonably savvy, interested in technologies and science and so forth, but I do have a streak of superstition. The mother of a friend of mine used to say, you know, you have to be careful, the evil eye is listening. And I always liked that because I never understood why the evil eye was listening instead of watching. But I have been loath to go into the details of what phase 2 will look like in practical terms, and how people navigate the community and use it, and where it ties into other activities and other projects that are going on at the state level, such as the Empire State Trail. All of these things are going on. Maybe I should have stressed this more. And if anyone wants more information, you can contact Mr. Miller, contact me. I have lots of other resources that I can pass on to you, but you must please don't say it's happened yet. It hasn't. We're very close to having it done. And any information that you want, I can pass on to you, because I think it's very important to do this. Yes, it will change the city. It will be a major improvement to the city. We're talking about getting people to come as a destination. All of those things, all of those boxes are checked off. But it's not just that. It's going to be part of a major project for New York State, which is moving ahead. So I think it's very important for us. And the Saranac River Trail is working with the New York State Greenways to become officially part of that. So there's a lot going on. Any questions you have, comments, whatever, contact me, contact Matt, and I'll get more information for you next week.
Any other individuals, please come forward and address the council.
I have another topic. You were talking about sidewalks and crosswalks. Down on South Peru Street, same side as the military reserve, the sidewalk heading in the southerly direction just comes to an end. I was driving by, there was a woman in a wheelchair at the end, scratching her head. So I stopped and I helped her. You might want to take a look at that. It's on the same side as the reserve, heading south, it just ends. So you might want to think about how that can be connected or across the street to the sidewalk on the other side.
John, what's the military reserve?
South Peru Street, where the Army Reserve,
Okay,
right there.
thanks.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Barbell, second by Councilor Kelly. Roll call.
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Kelly?
Yes.
Council Gibbs?
Yes.
Council Brody?
Yes.
Council McFarland?
Yes.
Council Moore?
Yes.
Thanks, folks.
Right. Rock and roll.